Let's go slideshow from the beginning. Okay. Okay, so this is a PowerPoint presentation for our homework from yesterday. I've actually combined this and tomorrow's PowerPoint presentation on guided ring together. Some reason, so that's why it's a big document. Okay, norms and obligations. Just some character words associated with what is a norm and what's an obligation. So you can look at those terms, try and get understanding of what initially, at least in English, what those two terms mean. A norm is the best, probably the word associated with norm is a belief, a value. And an obligation is a duty, something telling you that you have to do this, or you have to follow this rule. The essential motivation for doing good is to be happy. We've been looking at that from the beginning all the way back to Socrates. So doing good. So in the middle, you have someone on the computer, and the person comes up to him and says, "You seem preoccupied," and says, "I'm searching for happiness." So I attach this little image of a sign. Happiness is this way. So this is the whole purpose of our life, is to be happy. Okay, little cartoon. But as we all know, values are relative. Every system of belief is equally valid, and we need to tolerate diversity. Virtue isn't better than vice, it's just different. I don't know if I can tolerate that much tolerance. I refuse to be victimized by notions of virtuous behavior. How are you doing on your New Year's resolutions? I didn't make any. See, in order to improve oneself, one must have some idea of what's good that implies certain values. So these are all the questions that we've been looking at in the course. What is good? What's valuable? What decisions should I make? How should I make them? What is ultimate goodness? What is ultimate happiness? What is good that lasts? What is good that's temporary? What's our relationship with everybody else? How do we use other people for our good, for their good, for our good? And these are different values that we may have. And there's a whole bunch of them. Can often get confusing because everybody seems to have some understanding or idea of what a value is, and it seems like that a lot of them are similar, and a lot of times they seem to be competing against each other, or diametrically opposed to each other, especially when you add in different religious belief systems. But if you learn anything from grade 11 religion, you have discovered that all the religious traditions teach us the same values, which is to love one another. And we call that the golden rule. And in my classroom, in a lot of classrooms, you'll see the golden rule poster. And how is it that all these religions from different times and eras, different experiences from different places in the world, can all conclude that the best way to live is to love one another. And that's the central idea of every religion: do good, avoid evil, love one another. Okay, why do we need rules and laws? To prevent antisocial and unacceptable behavior. We want everybody to be safe. And those who operate outside of the rules make things unsafe. This is what your journal was yesterday, Marco Muzzo and drinking driving. When we give you a license to drive, we expect that you've been trained, that you have learned, that you have passed a written test, and that you have passed 2 driving tests. before we trust you with a license. The license means you're free to drive however, whenever, wherever you want. And we trust that you're going to follow the rules that got you to a license in the written and the driving test. And when you don't follow the rules, then accidents happen. To regulate commercial and business transactions, especially in our economy. We don't want to get ripped off and cheated buying products that are advertised one way and don't work, don't operate, or knockoffs. Okay, so we have rules and laws that regulate economic transactions, commercial law. To identify who should rightfully own property. In our society, we have the right to own private property. In a lot of countries, the state, the government owns everything. And you're squatters or you're renters or you owe it to someone else. Okay? To regulate family and personal relationships so that we have some protection for people within family, especially when families break up, especially when there is abuse. So we need laws to protect children and spouses from violence. To provide means for citizens to resolve disputes with other citizens. We live in a society, we live in a community, we're going to have arguments, we're going to have differences. How do you settle them? Is it might versus right? Whoever's stronger wins? Is it the many versus the few, the majority? Is it power versus weakness? So we have a legal system, a judicial system designed so that when we have disputes, we can take it somewhere else and settle it rationally. And the key here is rationally. We can talk it out before someone who's appointed to be a judge or a justice and let them decide based on evidence, not based on personalities. So we have all the legal rights enshrined in our Constitution. And the most important one is that when you do something wrong, you are presumed to be innocent. It's up to the other or the state to prove that you are guilty. Not that you are guilty and you got to prove that you're innocent. Presumption of innocence is the key to all the other laws that we have. You have a right to be told what you're being charged with. Police cannot go on fishing expeditions. Oh, we'll figure it out later. We just want to get you in custody. You have a right to demand why you're being charged, why you're being arrested. And if you are arrested using habeas corpus, you have a right to come before a judge or a justice to show that, number one, you're healthy, you're not being abused, misused in jail, and two, that you've had all the opportunities to get counsel, legal counsel. So these are the reason why we have it, so that when there are disputes and there are consequences, that everything is understood, this is what's going to happen. At St. Rob's, you have a code of conduct. So you know what Mr. Servideo and the parent council have decided are the crucial elements of being a St. Rob's student at St. Rob's Catholic High School. How you're supposed to dress, how you're supposed to behave. And if you break those rules, there are consequences. But you know what they are. So Mr. Servideo and the parent council cannot make them up as they go along. We call that being arbitrary. So basically, rules and laws are there to protect those things that we in society consider to be important for everybody. We've called the common good. Laws define the way people ought to act in society. So the first cartoon says, what's best for you or what's best for all? And the answer is really for both. What's best for you and what's best for all. What is for the individual good, you, but also what is for the common good. And so the picture on the right shows you that first, second, and third people have made it to the top of the hill or the mountain. And that's good. They got up there. They had the opportunity to get up there. But as a society, we also want to help those along who are not as fast, not as strong as us. So we call this the common good for everybody, so that we all get to the top of the mountain, not just a few that are strong and fast. Okay? Society, life in society is not a race, even though we make it a race. Competition, wealth, etc. So laws set norms or obligations. They tell us what is expected of us. They are rules to follow, laws to be obeyed. Now, laws are not an invitation, but a command to follow them and to seek the common good. It's not should, must. You should drive 100 kilometers an hour does not mean that you must drive 100 kilometers an hour on a highway. So if it says 100, it's not a recommendation, it's not a dictation. Well, what do you think? No, I don't like 100. I'll go 130. I drove 100 once on a highway, and everybody kept waving at me with one finger because I was going the speed limit 100. They all want to go 130. So laws use what we call imperative language. You should not, you shall not, you must not. Okay? You should not, there's some room there, but you must not means you have to do this. You must obey the rules. Now, the do's and the don'ts. Usually rules are don'ts, and you can figure out the do's within the don'ts. Now we have a stop sign here, and it's lights. Sometimes you have a stop sign. It's six-sided, red with the word stop, and then you have lights. Now, if the light is red, does that mean you should stop and not cross over, whether you're driving the car through the red light or walking with a red light? It says you must stop. If you don't, if you drive through a red light, people are not expecting that on the other side or on to your side. And so that's going to invite people to have a collision, just an accident waiting to happen. So you should obey the lights and not cross if it's red. And if you're halfway, get across quickly. Get out of the way before something does happen because other traffic is moving. So you should obey laws. They're put there for your safety. The criteria of laws and moral norms is to do the right thing. It requires a judgment. What we ought to do, what we should do, and the laws serve as guides for action. Okay, sometimes we call them laws, sometimes we call them rules, sometimes we call them principles, sometimes we call them commandments, sometimes we call them maxims. But all of them want us to do the right thing as opposed to the wrong thing. And so I have a few images, which way to go, what to do. We've talked about this already. This is similar. Where do we get these laws from? Eternal law of God, divine or revealed law, which is in the scriptures of all religious traditions, natural law of nature, laws of nature, and then natural moral law using reason. And then from there, put those all together, and we get human laws or civil laws. And there's a big distinction between God's law and people's laws. And in most cases, they are parallel. They follow each other. They come from. And as I give you an example, homicide comes from the commandment of Moses that God gave him, saying that you must not kill someone. Do not kill someone. And from that, we get the human laws in the criminal code for homicide: first degree, second degree, manslaughter, treason, sedition, trying to kill the leaders of the country. Okay. And this is sort of demonstrates a bit more. On the left, you have the Ten Commandments. And from the Ten Commandments, we have God's law revealed to us in Scripture. So in the Scripture, in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, you'll see the 10 rules, 10 laws, 10 commandments, 10 teaching that God said, this is how I want you to behave. Then you have the community. So this is St. Peter's the Vatican Church. So you have the church. And what I have below it is the people. There are people in St. Peter's Square. There are people down here. The church is the people of God, the believers. And then you have the civil law and criminal law. I could add another one, criminal law. And you have the different branches of civil law, tort law, contract law, property law, family law. There's a whole bunch of things. I haven't even included criminal law here. If you're ever going to be a lawyer, you're going to have to study all the different types of law, figure out which one you want to be involved in your career. But essentially, we have some help. We can go to God and whatever you understand God to be. And even if you're an atheist, that's okay, because for you, God is reason, and or pure reason. So it is rational. And if you're a believer, you have faith and you also have reason together. You can look at your communities that you belong to and see their wisdom and their experience in life, to see what have they come up with, what have they learned from the past. There's an old history saying that those who are ignorant of the past are bound to repeat it. If you don't know about the genocides, you're going to see them happen more. If you try to deny genocides, then you're just trying to deny the truth of what happened, and you're probably in the process of committing another genocide. Okay? And genocides are more occurring than you think they are not. Because people can be very sneaky, how they harass people, how they discriminate against people, and how they make their lives miserable, and disguise discrimination and disguise violence towards people, ultimately forcing them to flee for better opportunities and more peaceful societies. This is why Canada is so great, that we have invited people from all over the world to come to Canada and try to create a more peaceful life for more opportunities. And this is why the third gift that your parents gave you after life and after raising you is the opportunity to be here, whether you were born here or you came here. My mother was 7 months pregnant when she came to Canada. So I immigrated before I was born. Okay, I used to always say that I'm a high import quality from Italy, or I'm an illegal alien smuggled into the country within my mom. Because when she arrived in Halifax, they asked her, do you have anything to declare? She looked down at her tummy, she says, nope. And 2 months later, I was born. Okay. Why did my father first come here and my mother? For better opportunities, for freedom, for economic opportunities, for religious opportunities, for peace of mind. And that's what makes Canada one of the greatest countries in the world, because we've tried to create the best we can. We're not perfect, but the nice thing about Canada, we're working on it still. Okay? But that's only going to be a result of having laws that we understand and know what proper behavior is. Okay, we're going to stop right here. I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, so what I want to do is stop right here for a little while. And first of all, in class, so far, anything in the PowerPoint presentation that you'd like me to ask a question, and then I'll ask those who are online. Anyone in class? So far, are we good? Okay. Online. James, you can't open the presentation? I thought for sure that this one was not corrupted. I'll see if I can send it to you again, James. Can you at least watch what's happening and follow along? Anybody else in class have trouble opening the presentation? You can't open it either? Oh, I'm gonna have to get the IT people to tell me what's happening here because yeah. If anyone has been able to open it, can you pass it on? Okay, there you go. James says you have to download it and disregard the virus scan.
It's just because the file is too large.
That's a large one because I combined 3 in 1. So when I download it, it says it's too big. It's going to have to go to the Google Drive.
That's exactly what happens.
And the Google Drive won't scan because it's too big. So what I might have to do is, if it doesn't work out, thank you, James, for let me know. And thank you, Say, for guiding us here. Maybe what I'll do is I'll break it up into 3 PowerPoints and make it smaller.
I mean, it's still viewable, it's just not pre-viewable.
Okay, so you have to download it.
Exactly.
Okay. So Andrew, my IT person in class, I'm gonna miss you next class. You will be here, but you'll be able to chat.
Online,
Yeah, you come online. You have to download it. You can't preview it. And thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Say, and thank you, James, for bringing that up to me. Okay. Okay, so let's go back to presenting. Can you guys just make sure that this is disconnected? Is the oh, there we go again. Sorry, guys, I've lost my big screen here for my class here. So frustrating. Are we good? Okay, good. So we're back here. So this is the next section I want to go through. Norms. Yeah, what we've learned so far, especially with Socrates, know yourself and know what's happening and ask questions. Okay, what Socrates is talking about is using our reasoning ability. Never be satisfied with anything, and especially when it comes to laws and rules, just because someone says it. Just because Mr. Savidio says this is a rule, why do we have to follow it? If you don't like it, ask. Ask. And if it makes sense, then you can understand it. And the word we use is now you can appropriate it, make it your own because it makes sense. But if they can't answer it, they got to question it. Okay? It's like my father, I love him dearly. He passed away 21 years ago. Told my brother not to smoke as an 11-year-old with a cigarette in his hand. Okay. So ask. With Aristotle, we get the idea again to be reasonable. Immanuel Kant follows the same thing. Our duty is what we think it is if we were in the other situation. And we want to be treated also as important as well. So it's maxims. The Venus tells you to think. Don't just respond with your emotions. Put yourself in the shoes of the person you encounter. See their face. See who they are. See who they really are, not the image of what you think they are. And then with Aquinas, we're continuing following this, is that to be human is to be reasonable, to be rational, to follow the ideas of God, who put a soul within each of us and made us special because we're made in the image and likeness of God, and because he gave us the ability to think and to choose. So unlike animals and plants, we have intellect and we have will. So be who you were designed to be. A thinking, choosing human being. Okay? So for norms to become obligatory, they must be reasonable. And to be reasonable, you should be able to explain them. And you can't hide behind your position of authority because I say so. I'm guilty as a parent doing that with my kids. I'm sure you heard it with your parents because I'm your father, I'm your mother, and this is the way it is. Okay, we're all guilty of that because I'm the principal of school, I'm the teacher of school, I'm a police officer, I'm a leader of the government. Okay? If a rule is reasonable and is explained, rationally, it creates a sense of obligation to obey it. If an appropriate rule is explained and justified, you feel impelled from within to follow it. This is what we mean by appropriation. Make it your own. Kant says the duty and obligation are rational. Reason is a prime source of obligation. Okay? So obligation norms must be reasonable, not arbitrary. They must be able to be explained rationally. In order to accept obligation, norms must not come from outside authority, but from within your own reasoning. This is what it means to make it your own. And this is where the other has to rationally explain and justify every rule. Wearing a uniform is good because it brings you pride as a community. If you play in a soccer game, you want to wear a uniform at school. Everyone wears the same uniform in a game competing. So why can't you do that at school? If you go to McDonald's, you're going to have to wear a uniform that has the McDonald's arches branded to your behind of your pants, like a cow. You will wear that, or you will be working. A uniform provides safety. If you're in the hallway, you're not uniformed, then you're a stranger. If you're a stranger, then you are a danger to those who are here. You should be here, and we can spot you from a distance. You will be confronted and asked, who are you? What are you doing here? So uniform protects. Now, if Mr. Savita explains all this, then and it makes sense, then we should follow the rules. Now, rules, laws also provide a deterrence, and the deterrence comes from the word detour. So the first symbol is that deterrence, but it's a detour symbol. If it's construction or an accident, you're going to have to find another path to get around it. There's going to be a detour. It might be guided by police or it might be signs. It might be big signs or small signs that you can't go this way because something's ahead obstructing your path. So rules provide deterrence for us. Smile, you're on video security camera. If you see that sign, you'd be very foolish to do something inappropriate because then we'd have you on video. A few years ago, my grade 11 world religious class, two students started arguing in class. It lasted about 15 minutes towards the end of class. As soon as class ended, they went outside and got into a fight, physically fight, kicks, punches, you name it, right in front of a video camera, in color, with audio.
Ultra HD.
They couldn't deny anything. When asked, one said, he's been bugging me since grade 3. This is grade 8 years. You wait now after 8 years to get into a fight, and you do it in front of a camera. How do you deny what's in the camera? So the camera, just like rules, provide the deterrence for you. It says, watch out. If you want to do something wrong, don't do it here. It doesn't mean go do it somewhere else. It means that we're watching you. They both got suspended 5 days for fighting. Okay? So there's going to be punishments. And you got to know what the punishments are. And ultimately, you're going to lose your freedom. These are your handcuffs. Okay? So rules provide protection, but they also caution you, a warning, that if you don't follow the rules, you're in trouble. Mr. Savita goes over and over again, wear the uniform or you're going home. Now, prior to Mr. Savito, not to disrespect the administration, but they really didn't care. It was a free-for-all. And they would say, wear a uniform or you're going to be in trouble, and everybody would laugh. Mr. Savito comes here, and he's serious. But nobody's, same, another principal, they'll be on our case in the first week in September, and then they'll forget about us until he starts sending people home. Start coming to classrooms and doing uniform checks and then sending people home. Even if you had the wrong kind of pants, they were black, but they didn't have the symbol on it of the provider, you got sent home. You had a white stripe on your shoe at the bottom, or you had a Nike or Adidas symbol, you got sent home. And a lot of kids got sent home. That's the first time they ever got in trouble. And being sent home was the worst punishment until they got home. And they had to face their parents. Okay? So that's important, a deterrent. And then people started thinking, okay, we should be real serious about it. Some people said, oh, no, it'll last a week or so, 2 weeks, it will be back to normal. It went on and on and on. It's what, 2 years now? 2 years, Mr. Vito, or 3 years? Yeah, so grade 9, so 4 years. 3 years has been going, it's still going strong on this uniform. Now, if you want to have some fun with this video, go up to him. You know, these 2 mannequins that are outside the office, and there's a sign. What does the sign say? Anyone know what the sign of the 2 mannequins with the uniforms? Anyone ever read the sign? It says, these are in perfect uniform. Yeah, the sign says, this is perfect uniform. It's not true. He's wrong. What are the mannequins missing? Shoes. They don't have shoes. The statement is wrong. So you take off your shoes, take off your socks, you walk down the hallway, and Mr. Smith says, you're in a uniform. Or not. Those 2 mannequins don't have shoes, so why should I wear shoes then? Okay, you gotta put some shoes in there. Go to the Lost and Found, get a pair of shoes, make sure they're black, put them in there. Okay, now these are a perfect uniform. My problem is if you ever forget your shoes, you know where to get a pair, so you don't get in trouble. You can have fun sometimes. Okay, here we go. Laws, rules, norms compelled from within to follow a rationally explained, justified law. Okay, so there's a sign here. It says, sometimes it says, don't poop. Poop and scoop. So if your dog poops, makes a deposit, tries to fertilize the grass, okay, go clean up after your dog. Please be a good neighbor, clean up after your dog. That's reasonable. You don't want to walk and step on somebody's deposit. I feel sorry for our students at St. Rob's who take phys ed. Because in September, October, when it's nice, and even November, you're out in the field in the spring playing soccer and running around and rugby and football, whatever. We have really good grass up there. It's really green. The reason being that every day we have a special company that comes to fertilize the grass. It's called Canada Goose Fertilizer Company. And every day the Canada Goose come and fly and they stand and they eat some grass and they leave all kinds of deposits. So if you're playing any sport on that field and you are focusing on the competition and the soccer ball or the flag football or whatever, you're stepping all over the Canada Goose deposits. Okay, it's very difficult. How do you stop them? You can't stop them. Okay. But this is what happens in neighborhoods when people let their dogs do whatever they want and you don't take care of that. Keep your neighborhood clean. I mean, it's reasonable. What's wrong with that? Because people sometimes are too lazy. Okay. And we do have by law enforcement officers that sometimes watch dogs being walked and see if it's a deposit and see if they go and pick it up. And there are on occasions people to get a ticket for not picking up their dog's deposit, but it's rare. They don't have enough people to follow all the people with dogs. 5 ways norms assist freedom. Number 1. So all we want to, we don't really have laws, it protects us, it gives us freedom. The same thing Pam Stanza talked about the laws of God when it comes to sexuality. It's not there to wreck your fun, it's to enable you to have fun that's safe and happy and pleasurable. Okay, to be free. First, norms impart wisdom. Knowledge is knowing what to say. Wisdom is knowing when to say. As in Rob's, we say knowledge is the beginning. What you do with your knowledge now makes you wise. So you got all this knowledge, what are you going to do with it? So we transmit more wisdom from the past. We learn from what people have thought about and experienced and how they respond to the situations and what ideas they came up with. From Socrates to Plato to Aristotle to Kant to Levinas to Aquinas to Pope John Paul II to Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, so we learn from them. They put us in touch with those who have gone before and to protect us from a lot of error and hurt so we don't make the same mistakes and we learn from their mistakes and become better. So laws, rules make us free. This is all your parents are trying to do, trying to teach you based on their wisdom. They're not perfect. You will not be perfect when you become parents, but your parents try their best. Norms give us security. We are a nurtured species. It's in families, within villages, within towns, within cities, within countries, within the world population. We rely on easily learned rules to give us comfort and security when we do things for the first time. It keeps us safe. So your parents model for you proper behavior. You learn from your parents. Your parents are your first teachers and most important teachers, and they're your teachers for life. And they try to share with them their wisdom. Sometimes they even share with you their mistakes and their foolishness, but also how they learn from it. Okay. Norms help us to make decisions. Norms help us to make decisions with speed and accuracy. Example, caveat emptor in commercial law is buyer beware. If it looks too good to be true, it probably isn't true. We were warned when my wife and I were in Shanghai, in the main street, the main commercial area, that you're going to be approached by people asking you, would you like to buy a Rolex? Or I think it was $10. In those days, it would have been 50 yuan, $10? Yeah, 50 yuan. A Rolex watch for 50 yuan, $10. And we're told that they'll ask you to come to a side street. And they may sell you a Rolex watch, which is a fake watch, looks like it has a signed Rolex, or they may mug you once they get you off the main street. So anybody who wants to sell you a Rolex for $10 is too good to be true, don't go. And so we were approached many times. Surprising what people will sell to you if you think it's cheap and you can save some money. Okay? You can't get something from nothing. Most things in life worth having don't come without struggle, sacrifice, and commitment. Be very careful, especially those who tell you it's free, it's a trial. Having taught elementary school, I think I told you this, students I took surveys of grade 7, 8 students. The first drink they had is in grade 5, after a parent's party. When nobody's watching, the alcohol's on the table, that's when they started drinking. Or with a family celebration. But hard liquor was actually started leftovers from parents' party. Smoking was started in grade 6. Most students in my class who were smoking started in grade 6, and it was very, very innocently. They're in the washroom, and someone says, "You want to try a cigarette?" Nah. Oh, here, it's free. You can have one for free. And so after a little bit of pressure, want to save face, they smoke a cigarette. Now, sometimes they cough. It's horrible. Sometimes they like it. Sometimes they cough and they force themselves to like it because everybody else likes it. The next time you go to washroom, hey, you want a cigarette? Yeah, I could use it. Oh, it'll cost you 50 cents. The first one was free to get you hooked. After that, they want money for it. So someone says it's free, we know from past experience that nothing in life is free. You have to struggle and accomplish everything. You got to work for it. Okay. So they give you the freebie, a taster. It's like going to Costco. They give you a taste of food and hopefully you'll buy it. In this case, with smoking, they want you to pay for your addiction because now they got you hooked. Okay, norms help us examine our conscience. So we see these two pictures again. By giving us criteria and standards to judge our action, it helps us examine our hearts honestly and examine what's in our head. So we have Homer Simpson's and the good angel and the bad angel. When it comes to cable, don't do it, and the bad angel says do it. And of course, Jiminy Cricket is symbolic of our conscience. And whenever Pinocchio lies, his nose gets big. As many times he may deny that he's lying, his nose keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So you can tell that he's lying because his nose gets big. So laws help us examine our conscience. And we are compelled to follow our conscience. Norms unify people. They set parameters for how we can live in peace and harmony with one another. Norms give us a sense of purpose and common goals that are the main ingredients of relationships and community. Okay? As St. Rob's community, if we know that in the code of conduct, it's against the rules, it's prohibited to bring weapons to school, from a knife to a gun to a taser to one of those things you flash. One of those things you flash in people's eyes. A laser. Okay. If you know those weapons are prohibited, you can walk the hallways and be in the classroom at St. Rob's knowing that it's a safe environment. It doesn't guarantee 100% that people aren't going to bring weapons. And we know from our experiences in our history in Canada, United States, and other parts of the world, there have been many occasions when students, disgruntled students or students with access to gun, have brought weapons and slaughtered innocent students. From elementary school children down to kindergarten kids, to high school kids, to university and college campuses. There is a rule. We try our best to ensure the rule, make it safe for you, but knowing that the rule is there, at least it makes you more at peace. It gives you more peace of mind. That's a safe environment. So it unifies everybody. We're all following the same rules. We're all interested in each other's safety. We have anti-bullying policy at school. So we know that when you come to school outside or inside the building or in the classrooms, you're not going to get bullied. And there are consequences. And we will take action against those who are bullied. We don't do this kind of thing at St. Rob's. The biggest problem with bullies when they come from elementary school to high school is that they're not in elementary school, they don't have power anymore. You may have 30 students in your class, and a person may exert incredible power. When they come to St. Rob's, you have 340 kids in your grade 9 class. That bully doesn't have the same power, and you have an opportunity to make new friends that will be with you and support you. But what's important is that when you come to St. Rob's, there's no bullying allowed here. If you try, you're going to be in trouble. And if you're being bullied, just let the teacher know. And rest assured, we will deal with the bully with severe consequences. We don't do that kind of stuff here. Okay? That's how it unifies a people. Okay, norms are guides. Norms are something that is a standard or pattern of social behavior that is typical or expected. They guide and help us steer through the maze of human inclinations and desires. Norms are signposts guiding us through a tricky terrain of life. What's right, what's wrong, what's beautiful, what's good, what's compassionate, what's respectful, what's virtuous. These are the things that we expect of you every single day you come to St. Rob's, and hopefully when you graduate at the end of 4 years, you become a more virtuous person or a virtuous person in the making, because we're not perfect. You're getting better and better and better and better. What we hope is you're maturing. You're becoming an adult, what you wish for, and not acting like a child. Okay, stop right here. See if there's any questions. I keep losing this thing. Okay, Louisa, I'll try again as James said, you have to download it, but I'll try again to send it to you. Any other questions from online first? And then we go to class. Based on our presentation so far? Is all making sense to you guys? Okay, anyone in class have any questions about the slide so far? Okay. Okay, you're welcome, Louisa. Okay, let's go back then. No one else have a question? Okay, the word law comes from the Latin. I'm sorry, I've never studied Latin. I just know a few definitions. Mr. Yegeni is incredible. He not only studied Latin, but he also studied Hebrew and Greek. Yeah, Mr. Yegeni is a phenomenal teacher. Legendo means to bind. It's almost like legare, which in Italian means to rope. So to bind to what must be done. So law says, this is how you should behave. This is the way you should act. So I have a symbol of chains. Now, contrary to what people think, to bind is not to be prisoners of rules. It's actually to be free. Rules, laws make us free and therefore happy. A law not to bring weapons to school is binding on us. We must do it, but it creates freedom and happiness for us because it creates a safe environment. People always get stuck on laws and rules, especially when it comes from parents or from God. Too many rules. You're hurting my freedom. Okay, for Aquinas, there is an obligation to follow the law, no matter how it's written. And this goes back to a tradition of Socrates. When he was tried and convicted of corrupting the youth and being disrespectful to the Greek gods, he took his punishment. He allowed himself to be imprisoned and then to be executed for what he believed in. Jesus himself has this argument with Pilate, and Pilate says, "Don't you know I can give you freedom? I can decide whether you will live or you will die." And Jesus responds, "You wouldn't have the freedom of your position of authority unless God allow you to have it. So don't pretend it's yours." Okay? And Muhammad Ali, heavyweight champion of the world, boxer, got drafted into the American Army and was asked to go for his military training, and then he was going to be sent to Vietnam to fight in Vietnam. And he became a conscientious objector. And he says, "I cannot do that. It's against my Muslim faith to kill an innocent person. Because the Quran says if you kill one person that's innocent, it's like killing the whole world." So he was willing to take his beliefs and go to jail, take the consequences of what the law said. Because if you didn't go for the draft, and if you didn't join the army when you were drafted, you had your social rights denied and you were put in prison. And he was willing to do that. Martin Luther King Jr. was willing to put his freedom on the line and go to jail for the rights of equality for Black people in the southern states, and especially Alabama. And that's why he ends up in jail writing this letter. And why he argues about the laws. Yes, must be obeyed. I will go to jail. But in me going to jail, I hope you think about the laws and change them. Mahatma Gandhi did the same thing with India and the rules and laws of Britain. Okay? So laws come from reason, therefore you should follow them. Laws are tied to the common good, and therefore you should follow them. A nation is formed by the willingness of each of us to share the responsibility for upholding the common good. Okay, so there's two reasons why Aquinas says laws should be followed. Now, it's not that easy though, okay? That's provided that the law is in fact reasonable and the law is designed for the common good, not for a few people. That would be discrimination. Okay. And if you can't explain it, then maybe there's something wrong with the law. It has to be reasonable. If it's reasonable, you should be able to explain to the people why we have it. So there's two reasons why we should follow laws, but within those two reasons, there's a lot of demand put on the law to be reasonable and for the common good. Aquinas' definition of law is simply a reasonable decision. So when you write a law, it has to be reasonable. You got to think it through. Promulgated by a competent authority, somebody who's in charge and is legitimately in charge, some authority figure, and the law has to be for the common good. If it's not, then there's something wrong with the law, and then we'll see what happens. So a reasonable decision that be thought through and has to have reasonable explanations. We have to understand them. It has to be a competent authority, somebody who is supposed to be there, who's thinking about the people and what's good for everyone, not just the special interest or a few people. A reasonable decision. It's the first part. If it's reasonable, it can't be arbitrary. If a rule is reasonable and is explained rationally, it creates a sense of obligation to obey it. It's internalized. Therefore, duty and obligation are rational. Does this sound familiar? Yeah, Immanuel Kant. If you do not internalize a rule, an external obligation to obey the rule is established by an authority. Way back in the first class I gave you, do we follow the rules because the gods give us, or do we follow the rules because they're right? And we're continuing that discussion here. We already saw this before. Again, there's three types of law. God's law, Ten Commandments. Natural law, do good and avoid evil. And human positive law, criminal and civil law. They all have to follow the same concept that Aquinas mentions in this article I gave you. And that is, it has to be reasonable. These people have to be proper place of authority, and it has to be for the good of everyone, the common good. Third criteria, laws must be for the common good, the general welfare of a truly social contract, and the special fundamentals of a healthy society. So it has to be for everybody, not just for a few. Then we get into the idea of power and people using power to benefit themselves. But this has to be for everyone. Laws are designed to protect and defend the rights and interests of all the people we call the common good. These protect the members of the group from possible harm while preserving the bond and unity that is created within the group. Okay, so here we have 4 criteria that Aquinas says are important. But on this slide is going to be the journal that I asked you to do today, which I mistakenly put yesterday. And some of you sent me this journal on cell phones yesterday, and I had told you during class that it was a mistake on my part instead to do the other one, which was the Marco Musso story, right? So those of you who did the other one have to redo it. And this is what I want to do with today's journal. So hopefully everybody's tuned back in now. Okay. Aquinas says for any rule or law or norm in any sphere of society, there are 4 things that make it reasonable or just. And you have to have all 4 of these criteria. And if you're missing any of them, then the law is unreasonable and therefore unjust. And as a result, you don't have to follow it. Okay, very revolutionary, very rebellious. Okay. This is what Socrates meant about know yourself and know the rules of society and get everybody to explain it. And if they can't, then the rules are on shaky ground. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do is write a 1-page journal with 4 paragraphs, small paragraphs, okay, and answer these questions. And the issue is Mr. Servidio's and St. Rob's Catholic High School rule about banning cell phones in the classroom, unless the teacher allows you to, okay? Some teachers use cell phones and use devices now. With COVID and class learning, you're all on your cell phones. I have to back off, okay? Because this is how we're all getting connected. But if we were in a normal situation here and we didn't have COVID and we didn't have online students and cohorts and everything else, and we were all together in one classroom and the whole school is all together, does Mr. Servidio's rule still apply? So these are the 4 criteria. I'm going to list them right now. I'm going to go and give you a slide for each of them to help you explain. So number 1, is it morally right? Is it and not arbitrary or capricious? Does Mr. Servilio have it because he just feels like it? I hate these phones, I hate these students, I'm gonna make life miserable for them, and I'm gonna tell them, it's because I told you so. Arbitrary means I can pick and choose what I want. There's no reasoning behind it. There's no rational discussion, and therefore there's no rational description as to why we're doing it. Capricious means has to do with my feelings. I just feel like it. I just want to be a powerful person today. I want to exert my power, show you who's the boss. You're my subjects. I'm the king, you're my subjects. Okay? What's scary about this is, as I'm telling you this, I'm remembering I was a little dictator sometimes with my kids. Okay? I can tell you my mistakes, and I hope my kids learn despite my mistakes. But as parents, we can be very, very arbitrary and very, very capricious because we just feel like it. My father was being arbitrary and capricious when he tried to explain to my brother not to smoke while he was smoking. Do as I say, not as I do. That's arbitrary and capricious. Okay? Just, treating all people alike, otherwise it was not written for the common good. So I can't say, okay, this is one rule for grade 9s, and grade 12s don't have to follow the rule. It has to apply to everybody. It must be possible to keep. It has to be enforceable, or at least unreasonably difficult, but still must be enforceable. We'll come to that second. And fourth one is, it must be useful. There has to be some good for that rule. For the good of each individual and for the good of all people, the common good. A useless law is worse than useless. It's harmful. I'll come back to that later, this last point. Sometimes you can't be so strict. It causes problems. So if you remind me about number 4, I have a beautiful example that will demonstrate that you can't be so legalistic about rules sometimes. You have to bend sometimes. You have to be understanding and compassionate. Okay? So let's take a look at our arguments here. The first one. It has to be morally right and not arbitrary or capricious. The right decision, the wrong decision. The word of the day, arbitrary. Meaning, decided or arranged without any reason or plan, often unfairly. Synonym, capricious, discretionary, erratic. Example, he lived so much within his own head that the times at which he ate and slept were entirely arbitrary. Okay? So the first question you have to ask yourself in your journal, is the rule banning cell phones in classrooms capricious and arbitrary? Did Mr. Saviglio make these up because he felt like it? Or is there some rational reason for it? Now remember, any rules that Mr. Saviglio enforces in the school has the approval of parent council. In fact, sometimes the rules come from parent council. I've been here long enough. I was a student teaching here 36 years ago at St. Rob's when the uniforms were all beige. But a few years ago, the school decided to change the uniform policy. You're not wearing, if you look at the old uniforms outside the office, the main entrance, they were beige and orangish color, whatever. And in the old days, people had to wear blazers, jackets, and you had to wear a tie. And you had to wear proper dress shoes, not running shoes or black shoes like that. So the rule was that you had to wear proper uniform. And the parent council decided to modify it, make it more relaxing, especially when it came to shoes. Being in dress shoes for 8 hours is hard on your feet. So let's give them some more comfortable shoes. Black shoes, black running shoes, as long as no symbols. So they changed that. Wearing a blazer is difficult. So let's change it to golf shirts, especially in the spring and September, and let's make it into nice sweaters, more appropriate. We used to have spirit sweaters. We used to have names on the back, which is still a problem. I love them. My kids loved him. In fact, when Mr. Savidio, nobody told him about spirit sweaters. And so when he came here and said, no spirit sweaters, I was one of the first people who says, Mr. Savidio, you're making a mistake. They're those spirits of my own kids. And the spirit sweaters are cheaper and more comfortable and gives you a lot more pride because you put your name on it, put your sport, your event, or your club. You can put the year you're graduating, makes you look like the university. Plus you spend money on it. And so I said, you should allow us, that's where we get the spirit wear days and the school spirit as a compromise in between. So he thanked it. And I wish people had talked to him beforehand about how valuable they were. But he wanted to get a uniform policy and reward you with special days where you can sort of relax and even have cities days. Next one. Just treating all people alike. Otherwise, it was not written for the common good. So you got whatever rule you apply, have to apply to everybody equally. Not some people, not your favorites or whatever. Okay. So this is John Legend. A just society is not one built on fear or repression or vengeance or exclusion, but one built on love. Love for our families, love for our neighbors, love for the least among us. Love for those who look different or worship differently, love for those we don't even know. So any rule you apply has to be for everyone. Not for a few group of people and everybody else has to follow along. So it has to be equitable. It has to treat everybody the same way. That's what the common good is. The good for all people, not just some people. This is the hardest one. It must be possible to keep, enforceable or unreasonable difficult. Now, a rule that you can't enforce is not a rule. If you can't enforce police uniforms at St. Rob's, then what's the point? And we spend a lot of time chasing after people. We don't do that anymore. Last year when I had CAF meeting, I'd be lucky if I had 2 students or 3 students who are in uniform. Because everybody knew to be in uniform. They also knew that if you're out of uniform, we would confiscate it, we lose it for a day, and then you'd be in the office. We also knew that Mr. Savidio would be walking into the cafeteria, or Mr. Merlin, or Mr. Gatinanos. And if he caught you out of uniform or had your coat in the cafeteria, he'd take it from you. But it got to the point where everybody bought into it and accepted it, and only 1 or 2 people would be out of uniform, which is kind of refreshing. I don't have to spend my time being a security guard or police officer. And that's what's wrong with the other administration. They didn't want to do the work. Mr. Savidio wanted to do the work. He wanted to bring some pride into the school community and the uniform we wear. And it was hard at first. You know, he was sending 200 students home every day until people realized, hey, this guy's serious. And now we don't even worry about it. We don't even think about it. Okay? It's just part of us who we are. We bought into it. We've appropriated it. Now, the problem is if it's not enforceable, then what do? If you can't police this thing and have consequences, then it makes a mockery of the whole rule. And it's sad for those people who are in uniform. It's sad for those who don't use the devices to see other people out of uniform or use devices and getting away with it. It destroys the whole moral being of the community. So this is the one that's going to be very difficult. And if Mr. Savidio is going to have this rule, he has to enforce it. And if you see him enforcing it, and he's serious, then you're going to be uniform. If it's a cell phones, same thing. So this is the most crucial part of what St. Thomas Aquinas is saying. When it comes to driving on the highway, the speed limit is 100. Rarely do people drive 100 kilometers an hour. Most people are going 120, 130. How do you police everybody who's speeding? We value our rights and our freedom so much that's very difficult. In Europe and other parts of the world, they don't have a problem speeding. What do they have that we don't have? Although we do have some of these in certain neighborhoods in your schools. What do they have in Europe? That this is not an issue about enforcing speed limits. Photo radar. You don't need a police officer to be there. You just have a little camera and a computer. And it takes pictures of everybody who's speeding. And then a week later, you get a letter and a bill, a traffic ticket, because you were speeding, going 130 in a 100 zone. You catch a whole bunch of people. The cameras are there for you. But here we argue that it's a violation of individuality and our human rights. And there they say, no, you speeding or violating the safety of everybody else going normal. And not speeding, not putting people in danger. This is why, for example, in the Marco Musa case we had yesterday, it's illegal to drink and drive. So how do we stop these people? Called a ride program. So starting around end of October, November, the police are going to be out there doing spot checks, stopping everybody on the road and seeing if they've been drinking and driving, pulling them off before they get into accidents. Things like photo radar for speeders. Now, one thing Mr. Seguida's never used, though, and he could if he wanted to, we got cameras at the school, so we can pinpoint everybody. There's some schools now that they have this special program that they are checking every student's temperature as they're coming in. You don't have to have a handheld thermometer on your forehead. There's this device that's checking everybody, identify who everybody is. Everybody's online, and they're checking your temperature. They do this at airports now. And if you have a temperature, a red light goes on, and then they have to go, this person here, we gotta know who it is, and they got a temperature. They pull them aside and they do a manual checkup and confirm it, and then they take you away. Okay. So enforceable. Last one, it has to be useful, it has to be good, there has to be a good reason for it. It has to serve a purpose. Laws are designed to protect and defend the rights and interests of the common good of all the people. These protected the members of the group from possible harm while preserving the bond, the unity that is created within the group. Laws are formalized and usually legislated. Okay? So is the rule banning cell phones useful? Is it good? So let's go back over here. So this is your journal. 4 small paragraphs. You have to answer these 4, well, they're not questions here, but has to meet these 4 criteria. Is banning cell phones in classroom? Okay, and in my classroom, they would have been banned, okay? But not in this COVID era, and not with teachers who are electronically and digitally connected, more so than I am. And a lot of teachers use the devices as part of their classrooms. That's their right. They have the freedom. But in my class, I would follow Mr. Servidio's rules and say that they're banned. And Mr. Servidio's rule also says, but if the teacher says you can use them, you can use them. That's part of the rule as well. But in my class, they're banned. So is that a rule that's right, or is it arbitrary and capricious? Is it just? Does it treat all students in my classroom equally, or does it only treat some students favorably and others are being punished? This is the common good. Is the rule of cell phones enforceable? Can I police it? But it requires some work. You have to confiscate some. You have to bring it to the office. There have to be consequences for those who are perpetual users of cell phones, even though it's allowed. I know it's going to be difficult, but can I do it? Can I enforce it? Aquinas says if you can't enforce it, then you can't have the rule. Some people say, well, you can't enforce speed limits, so do what they do in Germany at the Autobahn. There's no speed limit. Drive as fast as you want. There's also a rule you can't drive that slow. There's a 100 zone, you can't drive 40. And then you're putting people in danger. So it says 100, you gotta be close to 100, but not so far away that you're 40. And not so high away that you're like 200 kilometers an hour, speeding and drag racing. Useful for the good and the common good, unless the useless law is worse than the useless is harmful. Okay. So that's your journal. Okay, almost finished, guys, for today. Martin Luther King Jr. One has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. And by unjust laws, what he means is, using Thomas Aquinas' ideas of law, an unjust law is a law that does not fulfill the four criteria that Aquinas pointed out. If any of those four things are not there, the law is unjust, and you have a right and a duty to disobey it. If there's a rule at school that all grade niners should be initiated to high school, which there were a long time ago, a rite of passage, initiation, and you didn't like it because it's an unjust rule that students put on others, then you don't have to participate in something that is wrong, unjust, that's arbitrary, because people feel like it. Because it doesn't serve everybody, it doesn't treat everybody together at the same time. It's not rational, it's emotional. Okay? So you don't follow that rule. Whether people encourage you or not, you show you're different. Immanuel Kant says, dare to know. And what dare to know means dare to be wise, dare to think for yourself. Dare to know. Have the courage to use your own intelligence. This is all Socrates was saying, know yourself. Make your own decisions in life. Listen to people, respectfully disagree with them if they're wrong. But choose your own path. Be mature, grow up, don't be childish. Beware of relying on guardians. Don't rely on people's decisions for you. Don't let them make your decisions. And don't deflect to them because so-and-so told me. A guardian who could be anybody in a position of authority, from a teacher to a coach, to a principal, to a parent, to an uncle, to a religious person. You don't defer to them. You live your life, you make your decisions, you listen to them, but you make your own decisions. Last point here is question everything. Make sure it makes sense. This is what dare to know. Are you afraid to find out for yourself, or are you simply relying on somebody else to make the decisions for you? Because so-and-so told me. Even when it comes to God and God's commandments, question his commandments. Why did he include them? What does he mean by them? You're not being disrespectful to God. You're giving God credit for giving you intelligence and intellect and giving you the freedom to choose, we call it will. And you're using what God gave you so that you can figure out what he said. He says, yeah, right, God, I thought about it. No, you're right. I'm going to do it this way, your way. Not because you told me, but because what you told me makes sense. It's reasonable. I've appropriated, made it my own now. That's what it means to be yourself. Kant says being autonomous, to be a law unto yourself. An autonomous will is a good will when the duty for the duty's sake is accomplished, obeying to reason and to ignore external factors. Seatbelt. Click it or ticket or die. Okay? That's so commonsensical. And there's still people in our society who drive without a seatbelt on. That's a no-brainer. We have so much experience, so many examples of what happens, how seatbelts save people's lives and how many people have been injured or died who weren't wearing a seatbelt. if you wear a seatbelt, you're telling everybody else to wear a seatbelt. You are autonomous. By your example, you're telling the whole world, do as I say, do as I do. Not the other way around. So if I wear a seatbelt, I'm telling you, you should wear a seatbelt too. It'll protect you, it'll save you. Now, Kant's categorical imperative is identical to Jesus' golden rule. In everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets, Jesus in Matthew 7:12. In other places, Jesus makes it even more simple, in a more positive way, taking from Moses and the book of Leviticus, in the book of Deuteronomy, love your neighbor as yourself. Being autonomous is not equivalent to doing whatever you want. We call that license. I used to think freedom meant doing whatever you want. It means knowing who you are, what you are supposed to be doing on this earth, and then simply doing it. I never go there. Autonomy is not relative. And we'll stop there. Are we doing laws too today? Yeah, laws as well, right? Okay, we'll stop there. There's a lot of presentations today. So let's stop here a second. Okay, see what happens here. Let's see. You guys are chatting, eh? Okay, Ben, norms are generally rules based on reason. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, there we go. So let's go through first questions in class. You have this so far to your journal? So Ben, norms are generally rules based on reason. Again, for Ben, there's 4 criteria. Look at Aquinas' 4 criteria. For Louisa, your journal is using the rule of banning cell phones in class. Unless, of course, the teacher allows it. In my class, you would not be allowed if it's the normal conditions. You have to use the 4 criteria of Aquinas that's in your slide. So one small paragraph for each of those. Is this rule arbitrary? Is it for the common good? Is it useful? Is it enforceable? Hope that helps, Louisa. So look at that chart. Those 4 criteria have to be in your journal. Is it reasonable and just to ban cell phones in the classroom? That's the journal for today. I think that's what. Thank you, Say. You're welcome, Louisa. Do you have some requirement of your journal today? Like yesterday, we need to connect our journal to it. So today you have to connect your journal banning cell phones to Aquinas' 4 criteria. That's in the slide that I showed you. So 4 small little paragraphs answering whether or not those 4 criteria are met in the law. And please remember, if any of them is missing, then the rule law is unreasonable and therefore unjust, and it's going to be a bit rebellious, then you don't have to follow the rule. But if all 4 rules or conditions are met, then the rule that of banning cell phones is reasonable and therefore just, and you have to keep it. Unreasonable difficult for David and still reasonable to have the law is because you have to enforce it. All rules, all laws are difficult to enforce, but you have to try and you have to do and you have to succeed within reasonable expectations. So driving fast on a highway, it's virtually impossible to catch everybody, and everybody knows that, and that's why they all speed. So there's only a certain number of police officers and police cars that are going to risk their lives and chase after speeders, unless they're really going like 60, 80 kilometers an hour. So that's difficult. On the other hand, if you knew there was photo radar and you can catch every single car, because that's the technology. The same thing like going on Highway 407. You cannot go on the 407 and get away with not being photographed and your license being photographed and you getting a bill, because the photo technology of the 407 catches every single car, not only when you enter the 407 but when you exit. We got a bill once from 407 saying that we got on at Bayview and that we went one stop and they charged us, I think, $10, $12 for one or two stops. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't use 407. So what do you mean that my car was on 407? So they sent me another letter and they had taken a picture. The photo radar takes a picture of your license plate and also of the windshield.
So I was dragging the bike.
I won't say. It wasn't me.
Oh,
Okay? So I had to pay the bill because it was my car that was on the 407. I wasn't the one driving it, but somebody else was, and I'm responsible because it's my car. So photo radar catches everybody, so it is enforceable. Mr. Servideo can't enforce everybody having spot checks in the classroom, going to the cafeteria, checking the cafeteria, checking the hallways. Now, I know he doesn't do this, but he could do this if he was very much more authoritarian. He could use the surveillance system we have in the school.
oh my God.
And if he was upgraded and identify every single student and have a visual imprint of everybody, they can point out everybody. So they don't have to go chase everybody in which hallway. They know exactly who it is because it identifies you. That's what they do at airports. Okay, they do that. So it is enforceable. It's difficult. He doesn't go to that extreme. Okay, I trust Mr. Ridley. He's not going to do that and look on screen. But if anything should happen in the hallways, if it's a fight, he's going to go on the cameras and get the evidence. If someone's stuffing some drugs in their locker, they got evidence. If somebody was sexually assaulting someone else, they have evidence. They can follow the pattern where you've been. They can trace your footsteps inside. The only place they don't have cameras are in bathrooms and change rooms, because that's disrespectful. But they know who's going into the bathroom and they know who's going into the change room. Anything happens in there, they can say, well, you were there at a certain time and something was going on, so come and talk, tell me what's happening here. Okay, Nola, I'll go back to that. I can't seem to download the slideshow. Okay, Nola, I'll do that for you. Is it Aquinas, is it reasonable and just to ban cell phone in the classroom is inside our package? No, the homework is in, Louise, the homework is in your package. I'm taking it up by using the PowerPoint presentation. Okay. So stop there, we'll go back to presenting and I'll go back to the chart and that sort of summarize it again for you guys, okay? Okay, so this is the 4 criteria. So I need a small paragraph, 2-3 sentences, answering the question whether or not the rule about banning cell phones in the classroom is morally right and not arbitrary or capricious. Where the rule banning cell phones is just, does it treat all people alike? Otherwise, it was not written for the common good. Now, there is an exception, I can tell you right now. Those students who have IEPs or often even ESL students, they're allowed to use electronic dictionaries, and IEPs can use their devices because they have word recognition programs like Kurzweil that will help them learn. So they have permission to use the devices encouraged, and most students, some are not willing to do so, use technology. So there are exceptions to the rule that we can bend a bit and allow people who need those devices to learn. My daughter had dyslexia, and so she had a learning disability, and so she required the use of technology, especially Kurzweil, that and then with Apple programs, she could talk with a microphone, an earphone, and she could talk, and it would type out all her answers, and she could process it. So with people with learning disabilities, they're allowed to use technology, so we can use that. And if the technology is on your phone, then we can let you use your phone. Okay. I know one of my students, he couldn't read or write. He's in my grade 12 class, and he had dyslexia, like my daughter did. And if you saw his writing, it was like a grade 7 level. He's a doctor. He can't communicate in writing, but with technology and what in those days was a dictaphone, where he would dictate into a phone that would translate into the computer, and it just matter what process picks up the spelling grammar. He did marvelous things, but only with the use of technology. Okay. Which reminds me of a question from yesterday. I'm going to ask everybody to write the test tomorrow, no typing. Okay? Sorry. Okay, so that's the key thing right now. How much time do we have left? And these are the slides that gives you a little bit more information what arbitrary means, what just means, what possible to keep enforceable, and useful. See how many slides? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many more slides? A few slides on law. I want to go through these, and then we'll stop and see any other questions from current slide. Okay, here we go. Okay, laws. Our passions are gifts from God. They're part of our creation. The most basic emotion is to love. Emotions are morally neutral, but depending on how we engage our emotions can determine whether they lead to something good or bad. So all our feelings are our response to the environment we live in. Their emotions are neutral. It's what we do with them. It's good to feel angry, but you go beat somebody up because you're angry. It's a good emotion to be tired because we're human beings, we get exhausted sometimes. But you never get out of bed. You stay in bed, become sloppy. Emotions are more neutral, but depending on how we engage our emotions can determine whether they lead us to something good or bad. What we do with our feelings is important. As Christians, our emotions should be channeled to something good. Passions are our search for the good. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, the passion to reach for the stars, to change the world. You have the ability to love God and to love your neighbor. And your emotions are sometimes going to help you, and sometimes they're going to hinder you and challenge you. This is important to understand the difference between license and freedom. Freedom is not about doing what I want to do. Freedom is not license. This philosophy promotes selfishness and denies one's responsibility to others and to God. Example, abortion. True freedom elevates our humanity, not demean it. License basically means you can do whatever you want. Just because Marco Musso had a license to drive doesn't mean that he drives when he's drunk. Okay, there has to be truth. not just the freedom to drive. There's two types of freedom, external and internal. Almost finished, guys. External freedom, freedom from the factors outside of ourselves that threaten our power of choice. Example, poverty, starvation doesn't allow you to get education. Tyranny, living under dictatorships of the right or the left. You can't vote or worship freely because of dictatorships. So these are external threats to your freedom. They come from outside of you, imposing on you a way of conduct which is not consistent with who you are. Internal freedoms are freedom from the interior factors that limit choice. Example, fear limits our internal freedom. A fear of flying may prohibit you from visiting certain places. Addiction, going on within you, tobacco to your lungs and crying out for nicotine, to alcohol, calling out for alcohol being your system, can hinder you keeping a job or going deeper in your relationships. So we have threats to external freedom and threats to internal freedom. And that's it. Tomorrow we'll be looking at in possession of Gyges' ring. This is Socrates and this is Glaucon. I'm going to be talking about Gyges' ring for tomorrow's class. Okay? So let's see what we have here now. Okay. So, Louise, okay, good. Say which charts are coming for tomorrow's test. Okay. Before I answer that, say any questions about today's journal and today's homework? Okay, tomorrow I'd like you to do Gyges test, Gyges. The second one, I don't know if I'll get to the second homework assignment. I think tomorrow what I'll do is I'll take up Gyges and Gyges' ring, and then I'll give you lots of time to do your test. Remember, tomorrow's class is at 12:30, and we'll probably have the test about 1:30 to 3. We're going to give you 1 hour to do the test, and those who need the extra time, you have an extra half hour in IEPs and ESLs. And I want 10 small paragraphs with a line skipping in between them so that you know that you have the ideas. And you can use all of the ideas that we've had in class and my PowerPoints as your homework. Okay? So we good with that so far? No questions? Okay, so go to Say's question. Which charts? The two charts that will cover this test will be the secularism worldview chart. It's out of 14. There's 14 ideas there. And the Sermon on the Mount chart, starting with the Beatitudes. So those are the key ones. You also have the virtues and vices charts that you have done with the images. So those are the 3 charts that will be very helpful for your test, because you have your definitions and you have some pictures, and you can imagine the picture in the situation and the ideas you have in your chart. You also have the homework assignment on secular worldview and Gospel of Matthew and the Sermon on the Mount and justice, and the assignment on character and the encyclical on Choose Life. You also have 3 PowerPoint presentations that you can print out the PowerPoint presentations and use them, or use them on your devices, because we're all online tomorrow. So you have the secularism PowerPoint, you have the Sermon on the Mount PowerPoint, and you have the Choose Life Evangelium Vitae PowerPoint. So you got 3 PowerPoints. You got all the notes available to prepare for the test. organize all your notes into two bundles or two sections or two pages. On one side, culture of death, including vices and secularism. On the other side, culture of life, including Gospel of Matthew, Sermon on the Mount, Kingdom of God, virtues, and Pope John Paul II's Choose Life. So if you have all these ideas ahead of time prepared, then just a matter of putting those ideas into your answer for the test because you figure it out, okay? So the first part of the test is 5 ideas about culture of death or vices, secularism. And the other one is 5 ideas from a culture of life, Gospel of Matthew, Sermon on the Mount, virtues, and Choose Life. Okay? James, can we use the 7 deadly sins and the 7 heavenly virtues as points to prove culture of death and culture of life in the story tomorrow for that? Absolutely, James. Very good point, okay? A culture of life is someone who is generous. A culture of death is someone who's proud. A culture of life is someone who's diligent, gets to work and help out. A culture of death is someone who's slothful, lazy, takes the easy way out. You can use the culture, also the vices of me first mentality, violence, all those other things that are on your charts. Okay, well done, James. This is how you succeed in tests, is preparation. Think of a test as a sporting event. Practice is the homework, and the game is the test. If you practice hard, the game is easy because you're prepared. As a coach I used to work with, you practice to see and to see to practice. Okay, so James, excellent idea. Thank you for the suggestion, and listen to James, and you guys will all do well. Would one beatitude or one virtue count as an idea, or is the entire beatitude or virtue one idea? Ben, excellent question. There are 8 beatitudes. Each beatitude is an idea. So if there's an issue of violence and fear, and you say, blessed are the peacemakers, that's a culture of life. If you say that there's a fight and you should forgive, then blessed are the merciful, who show mercy to others. That's another beatitude. So that's 2 ideas. I won't say any more of that because I'm giving too many hints. But Ben, excellent point. And I hope I've clarified that for you, that each beatitude, even though it's one section of the Sermon on the Mount, each beatitude is in itself an idea. That's your whole grade 9 course. You spent the whole year on grade 9 doing the beatitudes. Okay? Patrick, will we be typing the test like last time? No, this time, Patrick, you're going to be writing the test. And the only reason why I'm asking you to write this time, because I tried it with the other test, and what I don't want you to do is copy and paste definitions. You have lots of time to work on it. Those of you who write like doctors, try to make it a little bit more neater. Okay, I am struggling. Please use a pen, and please put your name on top. The last test, it was excellent. I think only about 3 students out of 32 didn't put their name on it. Okay, I was very happy. I just printed them all out, brought them to my desk, and started marking them rather than walking back and forth, and putting the names of the people who did. So thank you very much. Continue doing that. You're welcome, Ben. See, any questions in the front here in the class? Yes.
Like the deadly sins.
Okay, same idea. Any deadly sin or any vice is one example.
So if we really wanted to, you can just use that deadly sin, basically, just that 14.
You're too good for me. Okay, that's what I was trying to avoid saying.
Yeah.
Okay. I was trying to avoid saying that, but you can use anything that you like, any 5 ideas. You have total freedom to choose how you want to answer the question. This is what we call an open-ended question. And most of the questions that I've given you so far in tests have been open-ended. You answer the way you want to, but you have to justify, you have to explain why you're choosing what you're choosing. But you have total freedom to approach it any way you want. This is what you got out of it. Okay? You're welcome, say. Any other questions from the class? So 12:30 we meet as a class. We'll do guidance ring for an hour till 1:30. And then 1:30 to 3, 1:30 to 2:30 for most people, to 3 o'clock. And then if you need to stay later than 3 o'clock until you log off, I'll wait for you. Okay, so if you need more time, take the time. So for tomorrow, I'm going to take up just guidance ring tomorrow. So if you want to leave the other assignment, and I might give you another one tomorrow, so we'll see. It's Thanksgiving weekend, so I'll try to make sure you don't have any homework for the weekend. Okay, anyone else, any questions? Any other questions online, last chance? Okay, almost time to go. So guidance ring for tomorrow. The only thing you hand in to me today is your journal. The guidance ring is for homework. So just a journal for today. And I'll try to my best to give you an updated mark, so you have something nice to say to your parents to show them. Or you have some work to do this weekend.